What's up, you guys, and welcome back to my channel. Before I dive into today's case, which is a wild ride from start to finish, I need to say a big thank you to Hunt a Killer for sponsoring today's video. This makes me so excited. I know a lot of you guys probably know what Hunt a Killer is. I've been looking into purchasing a Hunt a Killer subscription for a very long time now. So I was so excited when they reached out to me, especially given the circumstances a lot of us are under right now. We're stuck at home. I couldn't think of a better company to be working with at the moment. So if you're not aware of what Hunt a Killer is, it is a murder mystery subscription box. Yes, you heard me right. It comes straight to your door monthly, and it's hands down one of the most unique and exciting games I think I have ever played. Each season consists of 6 episodes or 6 boxes revolving around one specific crime. They're filled with piles of documents, evidence, audio recordings, case files, forensics files, and you are given the task of solving a murder. In this particular season right now, Julie Adler unearths the remains of a famous actress from the 1930s and her family's theater, and something that was always thought to be this bizarre disappearance quickly turned into a homicide. You have to examine all of the evidence you are sent, eliminate suspects, identify murder weapons, and you guys, it is absolutely wild how realistic this is. All the evidence that I saw in my first box, which is as far as I've gotten so far, is insane. You guys, there's letters that are so realistic and handwritten, all of the documents. It's not a walk in the park at all. Some stuff you need to make sure there's no hidden clues. You have to hold it up to lights, spin things upside down. Each box adds more information, which switches things up and keeps things challenging, and even sometimes it relates to world events, real world events that happened in that time period. This is just perfect for those of you that are in love with true crime and you want to do something that stimulates your mind on a night off, or you want to have a different kind of date night. There's 2 different perspectives you can get there, and it can be a lot of fun. Or you can even do this with your family, maybe give everyone a piece of evidence and then see what you can find. But probably what I love the most about Hunt a Killer is that proceeds from every box go straight to the Cold Case Foundation, and John Douglas is the chairman of the board, and we all know how I feel about John Douglas and criminal profiling. He was, kind of what created Mindhunter. You guys also know I cover a lot of cold cases on my channel. They are just near and dear to my heart. So right now, just for my subscribers, you can go to huntakiller.com/Danelle Hallan and use code Hallan for 20% off your first box. Again, make sure to use the code Hallan for a 20% discount and to show your support for my channel, which I am very appreciative of at this moment. And let's see if you guys have what it takes to hunt a killer. Thanks again to Hunt a Killer. This has been an awesome opportunity. I've had so much fun so far with my boxes. And now let's just dive into today's case. You guys, this case is an absolute wild ride. If you remember a couple months ago, I said I really wanted to start incorporating a lot of educational content, maybe letting you guys know about different laws that exist, and this is something that I wanted to get around to until life got crazy because of something called Kaylee's Law, and one of you suggested this, but I had no idea what I was getting into at all once I started researching it. This case went from being just a missing person to, over the course of a few days, it ended up involving multiple people, multiple victims, and evolved into something much larger. It really brings to light in specific the scary reality of how far people will go with their bad intentions, and it also kind of sheds light on the fact that we see people with a badge or a specific uniform or in a point of authority as someone that can be trusted, and especially in this circumstance that was far from true and led to changes in laws because of it. So let's get started with the disappearance that really started all of this. This starts with a 23-year-old named Kaylie Sawyer from Bend, Oregon. She was a happy, always smiling, bubbly young woman, you guys. Growing up, she made the best out of every situation. She enjoyed every inch of life that she could possibly enjoy. She was the kind of person where it's not necessarily that she wasn't ever satisfied. She just had this limitless desire to achieve everything possible, learn about everything possible. She just had big dreams. She wanted to be a brain surgeon. She wanted to be a photographer. She wanted to do plastic surgery. She wanted to be a teacher. The drive behind her was enough to get everyone around her motivated to be the best version of themselves. She ended up settling into a job at a dentist's office, and for 2 years was their star employee. Every single patient that was either scared of a procedure or feeling a little unsettled, they would always send Kaylee in there because she just had this talent for making people people laugh and putting people at ease. And just before her disappearance, she decided that becoming a dental hygienist was what she wanted to settle into in life. And that was a huge deal for Kaylee, someone who wanted to do absolutely everything. Now, not just her work life was growing beautifully, but so was her social and romantic life. She had a ton of friends, you guys, super outgoing. She didn't know a stranger, and she also had a very loving boyfriend named Cameron. Now, Cameron and Kaylee lived together in apartments across from Central Oregon Community College, which was where I believe she planned on going to school to become a dental hygienist. It was a very nice and safe part of town. They were head over heels about each other. Her mother spoke about how the second she saw them together for the first time, she just knew this was a great relationship that was going to last. But then their whole entire world was flipped upside down in a way that no one could ever imagine. On Saturday, July 23rd, 2016, Kaylee decided to go out to a bachelorette party for her coworker. She originally thought that she was going to be out of town that weekend, but something changed, and now she was incredibly excited to be there for her friend. She showed up to Maverick's bar where the bachelorette party was being held at around 8 o'clock that night, and she immediately started drinking and dancing and celebration. The night was going great. There's lots of pictures from it. They were having an awesome time, but the crowd that she was with, it was her coworkers, and they were middle-aged, and their party died down a lot faster than hers did. She was 23 years old. She was ready to keep going, so at around 10:30, Kaylee and one of her friends decided to head on out and start bar hopping around downtown to continue their night. At this point, they had been drinking for hours, and they definitely were intoxicated, and Kaylee ended up at one of these bars dancing with a guy, and her friends questioned it just because she obviously was dating someone, Cameron, but they chalked it up to, she's not going to do anything, she's just been drinking, she's just having a good time. But one of Cameron's friends was actually at this bar seeing it and texted Cameron to let him know what was going on. Cameron ended up showing up to take Kaylee home around midnight, and in the car on the way home, they got into an argument, and this argument continued by the time they got home to their apartment complex parking lot. Knowing things needed to cool off, Cameron eventually decided to just head inside to separate them from each other. He was like, you stay out here, you calm down, and then once you have, come on inside and we can figure it out from there. But about 10 minutes passed and Kaylee had not come inside. So he went outside to look for her and she was nowhere to be found. He decided to call her and text her, and she did in fact answer and respond to him. She said that she was walking down the main road by their apartment, and she said that she just needed to cool off a little bit more. She was still upset, but she would eventually head back. A few more words were said back and forth, just kind of typical argument between a couple, and she informed Cameron that her phone was about to die, and then all of a sudden, all communication stopped. Cameron, worried for her safety, decided to drive up and down the main road looking for her, the road that she said she had been on, and he couldn't find her anywhere. So he kind of figured she likely just left with friends or something like that to stay away from him for the night, and he figured he would hear from her the following morning. But that Sunday morning rolled around and Kaylee never contacted him, and all the calls he was putting out to her were going straight to voicemail. Cameron decided to get in contact with all of Kaylee's family. He was very close to her family. She was very close to her family, and this was so unlike her. He knew that something just did not feel right. He first of all got in contact with Jamie, which is Kaylee's dad, and Jamie wasn't too alarmed at first. He kind of thought the same thing that Cameron was thinking the night before, because Kaylee wouldn't just disappear. They never expected the worst to be going on, so they came to the conclusion that, yeah, she's just with friends. Cameron also tried to contact Julie, Kaylee's mother, but she had been camping and was not in a location where she had service, and she didn't get back until later on that day. And this was just kind of an odd situation because it was difficult to figure out what was going on and how much panic to really be feeling, because Kaylee was also known for her phone being dead. It was a thing that everyone knew about her, but there was still this feeling on the inside of, well, if she is with friends, she would have access to a charger, and by this point, she would have contacted someone. This doesn't make sense. So Cameron went on at this point to contact Kaylee's friends, and not a single person had picked her up. Not a single person had heard from her since the day before. So finally, by the middle of the day that Sunday, Cameron called to report Kaylee as missing.
Dispatch, how can I help you? Hello?
Hi. I'm not sure if this is quite the right number to call.
last night I got home from the bars with my girlfriend, and she got upset at me and ran off.
Mm-hmm.
And I chased her and wasn't able to find her, and I still haven't heard from her. Her phone's off. I called all her family, and they haven't heard from her, so I'm wondering what you recommend I do.
We can put in a call, and we can have officers or deputies look for her.
Okay.
And where was she last seen at?
College Way.
College and what?
Alpine Meadows apartment complex. It's like at the top of College Way.
In that apartment complex?
Yes.
In a specific apartment or?
In the parking lot.
Just in the parking lot? You guys don't live there? Or?
Yes, we live there together.
Okay, what's the address? And what's the apartment number? And this is her address as well, the Aubrey Pines?
Yes.
Okay. And it was last night?
Yeah.
About what time?
It was like 1 o'clock in the morning.
Okay. Take out walking or something from this address? Like, she was mad?
Yeah, she was mad at me, so I walked inside and told her to come meet me, and then when she's like, calm down. And then I went back out in 10 minutes, and she was gone. And I called her a few times, and she said she was walking down the street. And then I guess she said her phone was about to die, and then I couldn't get a hold of her after that. I haven't heard from her since.
Okay. She took off on foot?
Yes.
What's her last name?
Sawyer.
Sawyer?
Yes.
First name?
Kaylee. Kaylee.
And what's her date of birth?
March 2nd, 1993.
And she's got her phone with her?
She did last I saw her, but it's been dead all day, and
what's the phone
I imagine she would charge it.
By this point, Julie, Kaylee's mother, was in service range and was very concerned for multiple reasons. She was questioning Cameron's story because something about it just seemed off. She also was getting straight voicemail from her daughter's phone, and she was also worried that authorities were not going to do anything because Kaylee was 23 years old, and technically adults can go missing if they want to. They don't have to tell anyone a single thing. So she decided to call 911 and kind of play up her daughter's medical conditions to hope that this forced law enforcement into acting more. Authorities decided to go ahead and meet with the family at Cameron and Kaylee's apartment, and it became clear that there was a lot of suspicion around Cameron. Now, obviously, it's a suspicious story. You know, your girlfriend is seen dancing with someone else. You are last known to be fighting with her, and then you claim she just walked off into the night and no one can get in contact with her. I absolutely see how that's a fishy thing. Plus, when it comes to someone in a relationship disappearing or, anything along those lines, statistically, it's usually more often the partner. So they decided to really look into Cameron. Cameron was questioned thoroughly. He was put through a lot, and he remained cooperative the entire time. He let authorities search his apartment, his car. They took all of his electronics. It was frustrating because his story kind of kept changing and molding, and things kept getting added to it, which made it more suspicious. But he kept going to Kaylee's family and saying, I know this looks strange. I know this sounds bad, but I was under so much panic and so much shock when she just never came back that I just started to forget things, and now I'm just adding them. It was a very tricky situation. While all of the questioning was being done and Cameron was being looked into, the friend that had texted him the night before was found and questioned about, how that conversation went. The man that Kaylee had been dancing with was also questioned. They didn't know if maybe she got his number and he took her after she got home. But all the stories ended up matching up. The guy from the bar never even got Kaylee's number, or I don't even know if he knew her name. So all of these people were cleared, and it became obvious that even though Cameron's story was a little bit odd, he likely was not involved. At this point, authorities told all of Kaylee's family to go and check anywhere she possibly could go if she were upset and just needed a bit of a break. They checked all of her friends' homes. They even walked the route that she had supposedly taken that night, seeing if there was any evidence left behind, if maybe there was a sign of a struggle, but no one could really find anything other than Cameron found Kaylee's car. Kaylee had left it at a friend's house before going to the bachelorette party, and when Cameron went, it was still there. She had never come to pick anything up, and the friend hadn't heard from Kaylee. Authorities were trying desperately to ping her phone to see if they could locate her that way, but they kept getting these really bizarre results. It appeared as if she was kind of jumping all over the place. And when they finally got one ping that they were able to race to immediately, it became such a frustrating dead end. Kaylee had given one of her old phones to a friend to use, and basically every time he turned it on to activate it, it sent off a ping as if it were her phone. So this just made it 10 times more difficult to track her down. They decided to look through phone records to see if there were any clues in that, and the only thing it really was able to determine was that she got home sometime around midnight, so this still matched up with Cameron's story, and the last time that she used her phone was around 1 a.m. At this point, everyone was relying on one single thing. That Monday morning, Kaylee was supposed to go into work, so the following day, Sunday, is when all the searching is happening. And they knew she loved her job, and she was very proud of it. This is something that she wanted to turn into her permanent career, so she would not miss a day at work. But Monday morning came, and Kaylee never came in, and she never called. By this point, authorities released the first missing persons posters. But in another town, while all of this was happening, something else related to Kaylee's disappearance was also going on, and it's insane everything that unfolds from this point on. It was 20 miles away in Redmond, Oregon. It was Monday, and a woman named Isabel Ponce-Lara showed up to a local police station. Now, this wasn't too off base at first, because Isabel was actually a brand new cop, a rookie cop. I don't know if she worked for Redmond Police Department. I feel like I heard that she actually worked for Bend Police Department, which is where Kaylee went missing. But she wasn't there to work, nothing like that. She was there to report someone, her husband. Isabel said that her husband, Edwin Lara, worked at Central Oregon Community College as a security guard, and he was in the process of becoming a cop himself even, but she said that ever since Saturday night, he had been acting a little bit strange, and then finally that Monday morning, he confided in her about something horrific. Isabel said Saturday night, Edwin came home late after working a long shift, and he just seemed a little bit off. The following day, they went on with their normal schedule. They woke up, they went to church, they had lunch, they even went to see a movie. But even though they were doing all of these things and he was acting kind of okay, at the same time, he seemed very distant and very distracted. Something was clearly bothering him and on his mind. Isabel said she didn't really want to question him, and it wasn't too startling at first because they had gone through a lot of marriage problems recently. While she had been away at the police academy, he had an affair and they were kind of going through it at the time. So she figured maybe that had something to do with it and just tried to keep him in good spirits. But by the time Monday morning rolled around, Edwin slept in abnormally late from what I've seen, and then he came out of the room very upset. He had tears in his eyes. He was struggling very badly with something. And when Isabel asked what on earth was wrong and why he was so upset, he proceeded to confess to her that Saturday night he had accidentally hit a young woman with his security vehicle, and he panicked and hid the body so that he wouldn't get into trouble. As soon as this conversation ended, Edwin grabbed the gun from Isabel's purse, got into a car, and fled. Now, Isabel, being a police officer and keeping up to tabs on things like that, knew that that same exact night, Kaylie Sawyer had gone missing after walking in that general location. There were so many holes in this story that police were absolutely dumbfounded. That's pretty much all she was able to give to them. They didn't know if Kaylee was dead. They don't know if he even specified that to her, if she was just keeping it to herself. They considered the fact that she could be badly injured somewhere, still alive. Isabel didn't seem to know the location the body was hidden or pretty much any of the crucial points that authorities needed to figure out what exactly was going on. And on top of that, she was very reluctant to give up any information on Edwin himself, other than the fact that he had no one close by that he could be with. The only potential family that he had close was in Los Angeles. This turned into an absolute emergency. All local authorities were notified that Kaylee had been hit on accident by Edwin Lara, and that they couldn't find him, so therefore they couldn't find her, and everyone needed to hop on it because, again, she could be alive out there needing help. They put out a bolo for Edwin's car, and every authority from surrounding counties hopped onto what was now a gigantic manhunt for not one person, but 2 people. They had no idea at this point how far Edwin could have gone because Isabel made some crucial missteps. First of all, when he left with a gun after saying that he killed someone, she did not call 911. We don't know how long she was at her house. She could have been there for an extended period of time. She then took the time to drive all the way into the police station, and then apparently when she got to the police station, she sat in the waiting room for a long period of time, not even acting like there was an emergency going on. So he could have had this gigantic head start and could have been anywhere. We're already questioning Isabel's decisions, but even more so when they found out that Edwin did in fact have family nearby after she told them that he didn't. And it wasn't just any family either. It's like a distant cousin you forgot about. It was his parents, you guys. And it was 5 minutes down the road, 5 minutes. And she kept that to herself. Now, they decided to go and question the parents, and while on their way there, they also stumbled upon his abandoned car. So the car they had sent the bolo out for, he wasn't even in it anymore. He had ditched it, I think, about 2 blocks away from his parents' house. And then when they got to his parents' house, they said they had no idea where he went. They just know that they gave him money and he left, and they didn't think anything was wrong. But they also, kind of like Isabel had done, completely forgot to tell authorities that he had taken their car. So now, instead of them being able to release a proper bolo, that information was kept to themselves. So authorities had no idea what vehicle to look for. The information that they had gotten from Isabel, they didn't even know if they could trust. Multiple counties were just desperately searching for him. Authorities decided to get a warrant on the Lara home to check to see if there was any sign there or clue as to where he might have gone or if there was possibly any evidence, and they ended up stumbling into just that. Inside the home, they didn't really gather any clues at all, but there was a shutout back, and this is where the investigation took a pretty sharp turn. They found a trash bag in all of the mess in the shed that was filled with items, and those items were all of Kaylee's belongings she had on her that night. There was her purse, her shoes, a bachelorette gift bag, her passport with her face on it. But further than that, all of these items were soaked in blood, and there was another bag that contained a blood-soaked rock that was larger than the size of a football, as well as a clump of blonde hair. What Edwin told Isabel, and then what Isabel told authorities about accidentally hitting her with his patrol car, was not matching the evidence that authorities were now finding in Edwin Lara's shed. This was absolutely no accident, and because of what they found, they no longer believed that Kaylee could be out there somewhere alive. This was definitely a homicide. But they were absolutely nowhere closer to finding Edwin at all. They had tried to ping his phone. They did get one ping, I believe, from Eagle Crest, which was, I think, a resort type of area, but it didn't end up panning out. And then right after that, his phone either died or it was turned off. So they had no way of tracking him at all. But while authorities were scrambling to find Edwin, he was also scrambling to find his next victim. That Monday night, around 9 p.m., Andrea Mays had just finished up her shift at a local shopping center in Salem, Oregon. She was in her car with the doors locked. She did have her windows slightly down. She was browsing Snapchat. I even have a picture of the last Snapchat she was actually posting, when all of a sudden, someone appeared out of the corner of her eye. And when she looked over, Edwin Lara was shoving his hand in through the window, unlocked the door, jumped himself into the car, held a gun to her, ordering her to drive. He didn't tell her where he was taking her. He didn't tell her even where he wanted to go, really. Just that if she did keep driving and following his simple instructions, that she would live. She quickly began to realize, I'm not just taking this crazy man down the street, because they got on a highway and they just kept driving and driving and driving. And it became horrifying as well, because while in the car with Edwin, he began to inform Andrea all about what he had just done. He told her all about Kaylee, the fact that he had killed her. He started showing her articles about it, showing her pictures of Kaylee. He told her that his car had broken down and that's why he needed her. He said that he had spent, I think, hours preying on women, trying to find the perfect victim. He was even thinking about kidnapping a pregnant woman and was talking about all the things he would have done to her. And then he went on to admit to Andrea that he had been watching her for a while. He was able to recite to her all of her, last few steps that she took, and that he eventually decided on her. Within an hour, Edwin ended up telling Andrea that she was driving too fast and it would give them away, so he forced her into the passenger seat and he handcuffed her to the car, and then he got in the driver's seat. She tried everything to get him to stop. She convinced him that an oil leak she had in her car was much worse than it actually was. She was hoping that maybe this would force him to pull over and let her in the car go and he would go find another victim, but he seemed pretty adamant on keeping her with him no matter what. You guys, they stopped so many times. They stopped at gas stations to keep refilling the oil. They stopped at McDonald's. I mean, absolutely everywhere. Andrea has said that the amount of people that she was around, it was such a surreal feeling, because none of them had any idea that she had been kidnapped. This man was someone that was holding her hostage, and he was just bringing her out to these places, letting her out of the car, and she had no choice but to follow him, because he would tell her, if you make eye contact with anyone, I'm shooting them and I'm shooting you. They even got a motel room later on that night to rest, and he attempted to drug her and sexually assault her while in this motel room, and she thought of the most brilliant idea, you guys. It was unbelievable hearing this. Right as he was attempting to sexually assault her, by some miracle, her alarm on her phone went off, and it scared the crap out of him. And when he kept asking what it was for, because at this point he was so paranoid, he was thinking, oh, that's like a signal to let the cops in. This is, something to catch me. She told him that it was actually her notification to take her medication. And he asked what for, and she told him an STD. So he completely stopped attempting to sexually assault her. Eventually, Edwin started making a few panicked phone calls and speaking in Spanish, and Andrea was trying to understand some of it, but she really couldn't grasp all of it. And then finally, he seemed so panicked that they decided to get up and leave again. Edwin swore that police were closing in on them, and of course, right at that moment, the car started overheating. The oil problem actually did become a huge problem. So he started to panic and tell Andrea that they needed to find a new car. And this is kind of when she realized, even if my car is ditched, I'm going to be coming with him. He is forcing me to remain his hostage. Edwin found a local motel to stop at, and there just so happened to be a man outside. It was like 5 a.m, loading up his car. So he was leaving his motel door open, and Edwin saw this as a perfect opportunity. So he grabbed Andrea, forced her to go with him, and he ambushed this man in this motel room. And within like 15 seconds, he demanded to have this man's car, and because the man screamed for help, Edwin then shot him in the stomach. Edwin and Andrea then ran to a nearby gas station because they weren't able to get this man's car. They obviously couldn't stick around because he had just shot him and the man was screaming and bleeding out on the floor. Andrea's car wasn't working anymore, so they needed to find another opportunity, and that's exactly what they found at the gas station. A car with all of its doors open. Inside of the car was a family that had just picked up their grandparents from Canada. I think it was the grandparents' first time ever in the United States, and the fact that this was their first experience is the most sick and heartbreaking thing ever. So basically, the father had been driving the entire time and he grew tired, so he told his 17-year-old son to take the wheel, and the 17-year-old boy just had his permit and that's it. They had stopped at the gas station, and the 17-year-old boy stayed in the car along with his younger brother and their grandmother. So there were 3 of them still in the vehicle while the rest were inside of the gas station. Well, you better believe that Edwin threw Andrea in the car, so now there's 5 of them in this vehicle flying down the highway. He forced the 17-year-old boy with a gun to him to drive. He forced the entire car to throw their phones out the window, and he started to tell them all about how he had this urge to kill. He was like, "Can I tell you a story?" And they kept telling him no, that they didn't want to talk to him. He was like, "You know what? That's too bad." He told them about how he had spent his whole entire life wanting to kill people, and he had just done it to Kaylie Sawyer and Ben, told them all about that. that. He told them all about how he kidnapped Andrea, shot the man in the stomach, and then about how now he had kidnapped them and needed to get to a place in California. Now, somehow, this 17-year-old boy convinced him to let them go. So I don't even know how far they made it. I don't even think they made it an hour worth of driving. He pulled over and allowed the 3 passengers out, but he still kept Andrea, and off they drove. Now, one of the people in the car managed to keep their phone, and they were able to call authorities. So now there was at least some idea of where Edwin could possibly be. I think at this point, Edwin realized he was getting very close to being caught. He was basically leaving his trail, and it was very, very obvious. So he decided to take Andrea's phone and record this. Now, I'm not going to show you all of what he recorded because it is traumatizing, and Andrea was very upset about it. There were points where she was put in it, and it was very hard for her, but this is an example of what he was saying while recording this video.
Hi everybody, I just want to say that I apologize for everything I've done. Most likely I'm going to get caught. And sorry about that girl in Central Oregon. You know, and if you guys are wondering if I have done dirty things to her, no. Alright, I'm not that kind of guy. You know, I just killed that other girl, you know, and I regret it. I regret killing her. You know, she kept screaming, and I had to silence her forever. So
his paranoia just continued to grow. He started to tell Andrea that he was hearing helicopters and he was seeing helicopters, and she kept, you know, looking and she never saw or heard anything. And his speed just kept on increasing. It was at 100, and then it was at 110, and then it was at 120. He was flying down the highway, bobbing and weaving, and he just so happened to pass a highway patrol officer. This is when the real chase began, and the person in this highway patrol car didn't even know who on earth they were chasing and the depth of this situation. Now I think he really realized there was no outrunning this. This was going to end badly for him if he didn't stop. So in a very bizarre turn of events, Edwin actually called 911 on himself. He told the officer he was turning himself in. Authorities were able to detain Edwin, but things just kept unraveling. He was very calm, like absurdly calm, and they also realized he was wearing full body armor. And when they asked him why, his exact words were, "I came to throw down." It almost seemed as if he was looking forward to being caught. But in an even stranger turn of events, Andrea, who finally felt like she was going to be free, she was going to escape this nightmare, she was so thrilled for this to be over, she ended up being arrested too, you guys. Both of them were taken down to the police station, and they treated her as if she was an accomplice. I understand that they have to take precautions, but this young woman who had already been through so much, she had been kidnapped, she was told stories about how this man had just killed someone, she was drugged, she was almost sexually assaulted. She was then taken to jail and strip searched. And I cannot even begin to imagine what that must have felt like, you guys. She was in there for 18 hours being treated as if she was guilty of something before they finally realized, oh, wait a minute, we messed up, this is a victim, and released her to her family. I know that the man that was shot did recover, but there was still a very long road ahead. Think about all of the people that he at this point had traumatized. I can't even find any information at all about the family whose car was hijacked, the 17-year-old boy, his brother, and the grandma. I have no idea what happened to them. Meanwhile, Edwin was absolutely rolling in what he had done, and authorities from Bend, Oregon are now having to come to California to figure out what exactly happened with Kaylee. They're still trying to find her body, understand what's going on, because there was no information that Isabel was giving them. And when officers finally arrived there to speak to him, do you know what he had the audacity to say? I'm just going to play it here because I don't even want to say it myself out loud.
Okay.
You know, wherever you want. Just tell me where you want to be set.
That's fine. I'll sit right here. Okay, thank you. Hello, sir.
Hi,
My name is Sergeant Beckwith.
I'm Mac.
Wait, I shouldn't introduce myself because you guys know me.
We know a little bit, right?
Had some sort of fetish and love for what he was doing. I know there was some evidence that was found that he idolized serial killers. He did tell some people that he came in contact with along this nightmare that he had a family full of killers, that he came from a family full of killers. He was excited about what he had done and he could not wait to tell everyone about it. It's like he was looking forward to them asking him about his crimes. He did kind of resist at first telling authorities where exactly Kaylee was. He said he wanted to be transferred back to Oregon first, so they decided the best way to deal with this, since he was so proud of himself, was to play along with his ego. And this did in fact work exactly as they had hoped, and he started to draw a map directly to Kaylee's body. He said that she was across from a mailbox with the numbers 18700 on it. Now, authorities in Oregon that found his car said that they also found a few notes in the car. One of them was a note apologizing to Kaylee's parents and his family and his wife, and this also had the number 18700 on it. There was also another note that said that Kaylee was hit with his car and killed in the B12 lot on campus, and authorities tried to piece things together to figure out where to go look for evidence, where exactly to go look for Kaylee, and it was frustrating because they couldn't tell, again, if this was all a joke, because 187, the first three numbers, and all the numbers he gave, that's the penal code for murder. And they figured this could just be an absolute joke. So either he was messing with them and that was all a lie, or this accident Edwin was claiming happened was something that had been very well thought out. I believe Edwin was interviewed for, I think it was like 6 to 8 hours, and he just nonstop spoke the entire time. He gave so many different versions of what exactly happened to Kaylee, what happened that night. I'm not even going to get into all of the versions because it's just absurd. If you want to hear pretty much all of them, you can go to the Urge to Kill podcast. They go really deep into it. But he did stick for a long time to the idea that it was an accident. But between the minor damage on his car and small details not adding up, and the fact that they found all this evidence at the house, they kept pushing because they knew there was a lot more to this. And eventually the truth, for the most part that we know of, came out. Edwin said that, again, he had always had the urge to kill. He was even able to tell authorities of different people that he had considered murdering throughout his entire life. I think the most recent had been his ex-girlfriend's uncle, and I believe there were actually potentially charges in that, or I feel like that was recorded somewhere way prior to this, which makes me even more sick to my stomach that that was something that was known that the security guard had issues with. And he said that that's also the reason why he married his wife, his urge to kill, because she kept him grounded a little bit and kept him distracted. But he said when it came down to it that night when he saw Kaylee, he knew that would be his first victim. The second he laid eyes on her and saw the level of opportunity he had, he knew he was going to kill her. He approached her thinking that she would trust him because he was a security guard. And not just that, at this particular college, their cars and their uniforms almost looked like police uniforms, like to a T. So there was even a chance she would think he was just a police officer. He had lights on his car, he had the push bar on the front, he had handcuffs, he had the whole 9 yards. He tried to offer her a ride, but she denied, and this made him pissed. He ended up choking Kaylee until she passed out. He then threw her in the back of the car. There was a divider, like a cage that separated the back from the front, also just like a police car, and this is what he used to pretty much contain her to the back of the vehicle. He took her purse, he took her phone, and then he decided to go ahead and drive down to the B12 lot on campus, which is kind of near the back. It's very isolated. There are I think housing units somewhere near there, but it was isolated enough to where he knew he could go there and do whatever he wanted and no one would know. Some point along the drive, she ended up waking up and she was trying to get any attention from anyone that she could. She managed to kind of reach through and crawl through the back cage area. She was trying to turn on lights. She was trying to turn up the radio. She was trying to honk the horn because she knew what was happening was not good and she needed to alert someone. But he ended up just choking her again. And at this point, they were at the B12 lot, so he threw her out of the car and he bashed her in the head with a rock, you guys. And the first time he did it, did not kill her. She was slowly dying. And while that was happening, he decided to sexually assault her. So she might have been somewhat aware of that after she had just been bashed in the skull. And then once that was done, he dragged her between some trees and he took another rock and fully killed her. He said that initially he took her body and hid it near his house, but after a while he didn't feel comfortable with it being there, so he then took her to this area across from this mailbox with 18700 on it, again, penal code for murder, and he threw her over the guardrail down a 20-foot embankment that was this rocky canyon. This just kind of shows how sick and twisted he was and how murder was on his mind so often. He knew the penal code for it, and he even knew where a mailbox was that matched this penal code, and he knew that it was the perfect place across the road from that to throw a body. Kaylee may have been a last-minute crime of opportunity sort of decision, but he had been planning on killing someone for an extended period of time. This is something that he managed to, do and have this plan with. He somehow managed to write these notes. He knew exactly what to say. He was offered his calls even after all this information came out. Do you know who he asked to call? The media. He wanted everyone to know who he was. He wanted everyone to know what he did. And he was very happy with himself for doing it. Edwin was charged with attempted murder, kidnapping, and carjacking and sent back to Oregon. Meanwhile, in Oregon, Kaylee's body was found, and it was in fact in the location that Edwin gave on the map, and her body was found in such a bad state that her family was advised to not come and see her. They said that she would be unrecognizable. That is the amount of damage that this man did to this beautiful young woman. Meanwhile, other authorities were sent out to Lot B12 with a forensics team, and pretty quickly they were able to locate the exact spot that Kaylee was brutally murdered, and they were able to gather as much evidence as possible. The murder was so horrific and devastating, and his whole multi-state crime spree was so horrific and devastating that prosecutors planned to ask for the death penalty, and they strongly believe that he should never be given the option to leave jail, period, because he was showing signs of being a serial killer. Had he not been caught, he would have continued on. He would have gone on to kill again and again and again. He admitted it was something he had struggled with his whole life, and they did not want the opportunity for him to ever harm anyone ever again. They went through every single bit of information possible, every bit of footage. There was not a single thing that they didn't look at top to bottom because they wanted to be prepared for whatever the defense threw at them. But unfortunately, there was something that just so happened to be missed. And a year later, the defense team kind of destroyed their plans. And I personally think it's absurd that this was even looked into further. I think this easily could have been avoided, but again, I am not a lawyer or a judge, so there could be things that I just don't know. But apparently, Edwin was being booked, and while he was being booked, he asked, and I quote, because I've heard his quote, "Is my lawyer almost here?" Those were his exact words. Authorities told him when he asked that when he had his calls, he could contact his lawyer. Edwin claimed that that was him requesting a lawyer and that his request was denied. Now, I personally think that's a bunch of BS. I think that is totally twisting his words. He did not ask for a lawyer. He asked if his lawyer was almost there. To me, that indicates I have a lawyer. I'm going to call a lawyer. I expect my lawyer to show up, not asking to be provided with one. But that was all it took for his confession to be entirely thrown out. The whole confession. Now, I know that sounds scary and it was devastating, but the prosecution had worked so hard on this case. They had enough evidence, regardless, to still charge him with murder and to still at least go for life in prison with no parole. They had all this evidence that was found at his home. They still had, all of his actions afterwards. there was still plenty. They had Edwin's DNA all over Kaylee's body, so they were still pushing forward. They just switched what they were asking for. But of course, Edwin needing to be in control of everything and make sure he stabs at everyone he possibly can. Right before trial, the defense kind of came up with this deal that they sent to the prosecution, and they said that Edwin would in fact plead guilty to everything. He wanted to completely avoid the death penalty, which they were considering still trying to push, in exchange for life in prison with no chance of parole. But the conditions were that he would not plead guilty to sexual assault. That is, in my opinion, like one of the lowest blows ever. I think that's just him making an entire mockery of what he did. He needed to know that he could at least get away with one of the disgusting things that he did. And it's so incredibly devastating, but at this point, they just wanted this man in prison. They wanted nothing to do with him. They wanted him away. So the agreement was, in fact, made. 2018, Edwin was sentenced to life in prison with no possibility of parole. And you guys, the courtroom at this moment was like nothing I have ever seen before at all. The judge let Kaylee's family go in on Edwin. I mean, threatening his life, all sorts of things that you normally would not see a judge allow. He let things fly. He let Edwin absolutely have his butt handed to him. And then Edwin, in return, put on the most sickening show, you guys. He turned around to the filled courtroom and started screaming out a prayer of healing and forgiveness. And you could just tell it was such, again, a mockery. And it was so disgusting to hear him say half the things he was saying, knowing what he did and who he was, that there were people in the courtroom, parts of Kaylee's family, that had to just get up and leave because it was disgusting to watch. But at least Edwin was put away and Kaylee received some sort of justice. Edwin was eventually given a second life sentence for the carjacking and abduction of Andrea Mays. It was traumatizing for her. Everything from start to finish was horrific. It was an absolute nightmare, and she is still recovering. She said that for 2 years, she just let it completely control her life. Kaylee's family also ended up suing the community college, stating that they allowed a man like Edwin to work there and it cost them their daughter's lives. And the things that they kind of stumbled upon and ways that it was shown that this community college could have completely stopped this from happening, and the things that they ignored is mind-blowing, you guys. First of all, Kaylee's family claimed that there were not adequate background checks done for any of the security officers, and they really failed the community just in general by allowing these security officers that they didn't fully background check to have vehicles and uniforms that were identical to police officers. No one would know the difference. You're basically handing over the chance for someone to abuse that power right off the bat, and anyone could do it. They also provided their security officers with handcuffs, bulletproof vests. They allowed them to detain individuals and perform citizen arrests, and the state legislation did not allow any of that. Literally just the school handed over all of these things for these security officers to do that should be completely not on their list of rights. Bend police had been questioning the campus's safety policies since 2015. I think it was about 6 months prior, because there had been so many complaints about what their security officers were doing. It was a thing at the time that their security officers were known for impersonating police officers. They also allegedly granted Edwin a job knowing that he failed multiple psych evaluations at different law enforcement agencies around Oregon. There were also 2 other possible assaults on campus of him against another individual that were brushed underneath the rug. There had been multiple employees working alongside Edwin and that had come in contact with Edwin from the community college that came forward expressing concerns about his behavior. And according to Kaylee's family, the community college also possibly knew that Edwin had plotted to kill someone before, and they still gave him a job. They still allowed him all of these things. So because of this, Kaylee's family fought for a bill to be passed known as Kaylee's Law. And it ended up being signed in, I think, less than a year ago by Oregon Governor Kate Brown. And this was a massive moment, and the amount of changes, guys, that this brought into play will absolutely save countless lives. First and foremost, it mandates steps to ensure that campus officers and their equipment do not resemble in any way, shape, or form a police officer, like real law enforcement. And it prohibits the security officers to even act in any way, shape, or form as if they are law enforcement. So this means they can no longer have lights on top of their vehicles. They cannot have the front push bar on their bumpers. They're not allowed to be cages anymore, which, like, to me is just wild. You are patrolling a college, okay? If someone is that wild, you call actual police. There has to be a GPS tracking them or an interior video camera at all times that is being recorded for safety purposes. There also have to be national background checks on each potential employee, as well as psychological tests and evaluations to ensure that they are not in the same mindset that Edwin was, where they have a constant urge to kill. All of these things were passed in hopes that another individual does not fall victim to someone abusing the system, because had he not had handcuffs, she might have had the opportunity to run. Had he not had this cage, things might have been different. Had he not been hired to begin with because he failed psych evaluations, was known that he tried to kill someone, none of this would have happened. It's crazy to me how, just something that simple as fully doing a background check or actually paying attention to the person that you're hiring, which does not take that much more effort, can lead to this many people being absolutely traumatized, someone losing their life, families being destroyed. I'm so happy that he ended up being caught, because just like authorities said and everyone who's looked into this, he would have kept on killing. This is something that he thought was absolutely great. He wanted people to know about it. He wanted to affect as many people as possible because he knew that gave him more of a chance of, being on the national news. How sick in the head do you have to be to have that as a goal? I hope this really puts into perspective the different ways that you can keep yourself safe, especially on campus or in parking lots by yourself, in large shopping centers. This really makes you think of all the different ways that you can unexpectedly have something horrible happen to you. I know it's definitely made me rethink a lot, even just how I walk out to my car late at night. Make sure you take precautions to keep yourself safe, because there are crazy people out there that will go to whatever length they can to harm you. But that's all I have for you guys today. I want to thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to listen to the stories of all these individuals that were so horrifically impacted by this, and to also hear about Kaylee's law, which is absolutely critical in my opinion to keeping things like this from happening. If you haven't already, hit the subscribe button to become a part of the Hallan fam, so hopefully we can bring them home together, and I will see you guys in my next video. Bye.